Hello and welcome to another one of the Wildlife Osteopath Diaries, and today's one is an exciting one about an injured red kite. So without further ado, let's roll the tape and see how we get on. Now this red kite came in with suspected shooting on x-ray. It had some shotgun pellets still in the soft tissues. There were no bony or damage to any of the organs, and it couldn't use either of its legs. In the clip you just saw, we were using a camera trap. That was after it had been in a day. The camera trap didn't work initially, and so it was reset. By this stage it was able to use its legs somewhat, but it was very clumsy, and hence why it's kept in a kennel. Now wild red kites will gape, keep their mouths open. They'll also often play dead, but if you actually pick them up, then they come to life very quickly. So the nurse here is just restraining it, and we're trying to reduce stress levels. So we're actually treating it in one of the isolation rooms, so as to keep noise and human contact to an absolute minimum. And in order to start my examination, I'm going to start at one end. Just so happens I'm starting at the head, and then having a quick overview and feel down through the various joints, muscles and limbs, to assess how the bird is at sort of artificial rest, if you like, because it's obviously being held by somebody else. Where I'm working now is an area where the thoracic spine meets the what's called the synsacrum, and the synsacrum is a fused block of honeycomb lightweight bone, which basically in us would be your lumbar spine and your sacrum. The sacrum being the part of the spine that joins with each half of the pelvis, but in the bird it's a solid block, albeit a very lightweight one, which allows for the attachment of really strong muscles. And you can see on the tail that we've fitted a tail guard. That's because the bird was walking around on the floor, and obviously when they do their toilet it would get on the feathers and would cause damage to the plumage, which would mean that the bird would have to spend a lot more time in rehab whilst new feathers grow. I'm now using the legs themselves as gentle levers, so the longer the lever the less force you need. All of this work is incredibly gentle, and I'm feeling not just up into the hips but also how the pelvis is articulating, and there are various other unique structures to birds that I'm just picking up on and feeling through to make sure that, and to ascertain, whether one leg is stronger than the other, which in this case it was, and the right leg was actually stronger than the left. And once I've managed to articulate the legs as much as I need to, then it's a case of moving on to the wings. And again, with birds you need to be very, very careful, because they will flap sometimes and struggle. And obviously I don't want to add to the injuries and problems that the bird already has. So it's essential that I don't make matters worse. And then once I've worked my way through the wing joints, so they have a shoulder, elbow and wrist exactly the same as us. It's called the carpus, the wrist is, and I'm working up gently, feeling the joints in the neck, and then we placed it back in the kennel and viewed it using the camera trap. So this is a standard wildlife camera trap, which means that the bird can behave as normally as possible. And you can see it on this wood block perch, and it's able to move about. And then we witnessed it eating, and it's standing on the food whilst tearing chunks off. And this is great because it means there's strength in those feet to actually be able to stand on the food and then pluck bits off in order to eat. So this is all great news, and exactly what we were hoping would be the case. And so we moved it into one of the outdoor pens, one of the aviaries, and again set up a camera trap out there to monitor it flying about, how it could perch, what its balance was like, its ability to grasp the perches, and as you can see, it's coping perfectly well, which is always a bonus. You know, none of this stuff is set in stone. We often get simple cases in, and sometimes they just don't respond. Other times we get horrendous cases and they do really well. This one was sort of middle of the road. It could have gone either way, but at this stage doing rather well. And so we then went in, and I apologise for the exposure here. We don't go in using lights or anything else because these are wild birds and we do not want to stress them any more than is absolutely necessary. But we do need to actually physically see them move, and if it's a bird, obviously we need to see it fly, and before then gently catching it. And because we wanted to keep stress levels down, we did this examination in the aviary itself. And starting with the head end, and whilst the other handler is gently restraining the bird and keeping it calm. And I'm feeling for the very subtle changes in the soft tissues, which will be really important for the bird when it's flying, because if you ever watch red kites when they're flying, you'll know they're incredibly agile. And at this point, I'd also say take a close look at those eyes, because they are like looking into liquid gold. Absolutely magnificent creatures. It is an offence to shoot these, so just bear that in mind, that if you see people taking pot shots at birds of prey, at raptors, they are breaking the law. I'm using very gentle contact here, and what I'm doing is I'm taking resting tension out of the muscles and fascia, and when we're working on the muscles and the fascia, we call it myofascial work. And this is very gentle. I'm not forcing anything. This bird can, if it wants to, stop me from doing this. I'm just doing very slow, deliberate movements in order to make sure that we get every bit of tension that is still there removed. Because if this bird goes back out into the wild, we're not going to be able to catch it again, not if we've done our job right. And so we need to make sure it's as good as we can possibly get it. And you can see that the feet are fairly relaxed. The other handler has gently got those, and the wings. This is just keeping the bird nice and calm and allowing me just to get this tension out. And as I say, I'm using absolutely minimal pressure and force here. It's not about strength, this job. It's about dexterity and subtle releases of tension. There we go. And then I just want to move further down the neck, and the bird just flinched then, so I moved my hand out the way, because if they do catch you, it's not pleasant, and I do need my hands in good shape in order to be able to do the work as best as I possibly can. And just finding a little bit more tension on the right hand side of the neck, and just wanting to make sure that I can get that released as best as possible. All the time checking and rechecking, but doing the minimum that is actually required. And I'm working my way down the bird's back and using the tail as a lever, or the coccygeal vertebrae, so the tail vertebrae, just holding there, and then working from above. The camera angle will change in a minute and you'll be able to see where my hands are. I was just feeling where that junction is with the synsacrum and the thoracic spine, and making sure that it's articulating as best as possible. And once I've done that, I want to go and check back up in the neck, because no part of the body works in isolation without having an effect on all the other parts. And so once I've worked on one bit, I want to check the results with the other parts. There you go, and happy with that. And then we just gently, we being the other handler, place it on this AstroTurf area where the bird can grip, and then we can move out of the way and then watch it move. And being a bird, it's going to want to get up onto a perch, and then just checking how it is after the treatment. If you look, that's pretty symmetrical. It's balancing, it's keeping an eye on what we're doing still in the aviary, but it's doing really well. And then it's time for release, and we were very kindly given the footage of its release. And this was shot on a mobile phone, so apologies for the standard, but you can see that the bird flying off nicely. It's flying up pretty high and going off into the distance. So that is a perfect end to a rehabilitation treatment of a red kite. So another fantastic case from the Osteopathy Wildlife Diaries. Please stay tuned. We will have more of these coming up. We're going to have loads of other videos coming up with all sorts of other fascinating cases for you to see. So until we see you again, take care, stay safe and stay healthy.